Tapping in.
Are we live?
Yo. The kids official sliding on the instrumental. Nordic combos, twist your mental like forbidden jitsus. My click's initial.
Now, Brother Miles, you know one of our favorite topics over here is hip hop, right? We love hip hop over here at the Live House, you know. And this week we saw the coming of two of hip hop's great coming together to free Larry Hoover, right? Now, the words free somebody are words that we toss around very loosely in hip hop. Everybody got to free somebody. Those are new words in hip hop.
Definitely not. Definitely not. And that speaks to that it's not a new situation for us to be dealing with incarceration. You know what I'm saying? Hip hop comes from oppressed people, and oppressed people are often very close to the system of incarceration, and unfortunately, entirely too close to the system of justice. So I think it speaks to that proximity. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But like for the international people like myself who might not particularly be well versed with American, especially because Larry Hoover's Chicago, right?
Yeah, but I was about to say, from me as a, I thought you were about to say that as a South African, y'all were not well versed in having the movement to free anybody. I would say that you're overlooking some key political figures in that.
Like who? Name one. Name a single one.
But no, speak to that. That's for sure for you to speak on. South Africa is forever in the building on this show. So speak on that.
Actually, it was more so towards as just an outsider who doesn't know who Larry Hoover is, but because Chicago is second home, I understand that Larry Hoover is from Chicago, and that's like the narrative that Kanye has been making aware of. So like, in honesty, like who is Larry Hoover even, and why is this movement even? Why is this something that would warrant such a stand between two of hip hop's big, advocating for this man to get out outside of injustice?
Yeah. So Larry Hoover is known as one of the key leaders of the Black Gangster Disciples, right? One of the gangs that was formed in Chicago in the early, I feel like this late 60s, early 70s, maybe even earlier than that, right? And the important context that should overhang this whole conversation is that, man, is that some ugly merch.
Damn, no, that's the overarching thing about this conversation is how ugly the merch is.
But the way that and shout out to the YouTube audience that is enjoying the beautiful visuals as orchestrated by my boys Way here in the building. We got the merch up, and it's not to my taste, but what I really meant to say was that something that should be understood, like in the background of this whole conversation, is that in that time when Larry Hoover's initial gang affiliation is reported to have happened, right? Is alleged to have happened. So we're talking about a different time where gangs like the Gangster Disciples, the Black P Stones were much more organized, much more structured, and contributed to the community in ways that are much closer to groups like the Black Panthers, like the Brown Berets, like these other organizations that we know to have participated in youth programs and stuff like that. When gangs stood at their most organized and most impactful in the community, there for sure is violence and drugs to address, but important context is that there was also a lot more. It was a different community sentiment because of what was given back to the community in the midst of that.
So the original idea of what gangs were for was community centered and impact led, right? So in the case of Larry Hoover, in part of his conviction, he's serving 6 life sentences, right? Sentenced to an onerous amount of years. I think it's like hundreds years even, right? But the question is, under the premise that he hired somebody to kill, and was also a figurehead for a notorious crime syndicate. So, I understand. I understand the fact that the system of jail is broken, and because of that, there's a we're always all working against the whole system. But then in the case like this, what still makes this a point of concern, I guess, outside of personal interest?
Well, I guess when you speak to the personal interests of enough people, you're speaking to community interest, right? And so that's the part of it, as you really, like, you summed it up really perfectly, right? Gangs were initially created as a mechanism to achieve stability, safety, and justice in communities that were not granted those things by the overarching white infrastructure, right? Now, in order to finance and fund those gangs, different organizations turn to different means. But what was overwhelmingly true was that the leaders that emerged as a part of these organizations were heavily surveilled and heavily cracked down on. Right? We saw that with Fred Hampton, who's the leader of the Black Panthers. We saw that with Jeff Ford, who's the leader of the Black Keystone Rangers, and we see that with Larry Hoover. And so when you speak to something we've said also before on this podcast, is that when a young Black man starts to get some money, a lot of people eat. And when you speak to the movement, the massive movement and its entrenchment in hip hop, is that it's that ringing true. It's the complexity of this person started an organization that has since become to be notorious, as you've said, in the space of crime, but also the fact that there are so many people saying free Larry Hoover, the fact that there's this narrative and there's this fact that there's this community understanding that he was a valuable member of the community as an organizer, as somebody who could bring people together, and understanding that his messaging has changed. How much you buy into that, how much you believe that, how much you think that's just him wanting to get out of jail. His more recent statements denouncing violence and really emphasizing education, right? But I think there's a community of people that see him as somebody who was valuable to the space, right? And there's also a conversation to be had about the fractured nature, the uncontrolled, the unorganized nature of gangs as they exist today in Chicago, right? It's not really one set of BDs and GDs. It's a million block by block gangs that are completely unorganized. So what does it mean to bring somebody who might have some credibility in space and to who's talking about organizing education is the argument, I think, that you're asking for.
Yeah. Now you're a big Chicago supporter and a supporter of Chicago community work. Did you see the Free Hoover show that Kanye and Drake put on, and would you go?
No, I wouldn't go to. I'm still too scared of the vid. But I would say that, and I didn't see it. I thought about
It was cool. It was cool, man. It was very cool.
Dope. I'm glad you saw it. And you can speak a little bit more to it. But yeah, as somebody who is involved in violence prevention work, right here in Chicago, there were some things about it that I was kind of like, and not the least of which was Larry Hoover, right? His affiliation and the concert being centered around him wouldn't have made me shy away from it if I felt like it was being done in a way that really could promote action and progress. But it felt more like, well, tell me about what it was. Tell me about what you saw.
I mean, from just a basic view, right? It's Kanye putting on a show, and Kanye, obviously, it was a Kanye based show that was featuring Drake, and that's how it was even sold as. It was a Kanye West show featuring Drake, and they at the Coliseum in LA, which is a open door outside type of venue, right? Outside type of stadium. And Kanye is just a masterful creator of space and design and texture and audio. He's dope with it. He's dope with it. So the stage was essentially a white mountain type thing, like a small white hill in the middle of this whole thing. A lot of smoke around. It was really dope, and we'll pull up some images from it. from that perspective, it was cool. It's cool to see two artists working together like that. I think hip hop needs more unity, definitely. So seeing your Drake and Kanye on the same stage for a cause around prison of jail reform to a certain extent, I gotta be with that. I gotta be with that. And that's the type of unity that we try to like, that we keep saying hip hop needs more of. So shout out to these men, regardless of how petty what it is that they did to, however petty it was. At the end of the day, they pieced it up like men for a purpose bigger than themselves. And for that, I gotta big up. So this was Kanye's first show in 5 years, they say. And it was dope, man. You know how Ye does it. Ye did the first half. Drake comes on in the second half. Clean show. It was dope.
How was it Kanye's first show in 5 years if that dude has been touring Donda for the last 18 months?
Damn, bro. The media got me with those titles. You know how they do it.
I really want to be all on board with like, yeah, two piecing it up for a cause that's bigger than them in prison reform. But like, having watched it, did it feel like Larry Hoover or prison reform were central to what you were seeing? What was your takeaway with regard to those things? Or am I being obtuse and looking for that? Is it supposed to just be fun and the money goes there?
Yeah, and that's the idea. But what you're hearing is that the cash might not have, and I'm getting some feedback on your end. Not all of the cash particularly went to the Hoover family or whatever the case was. They said that the merchandise didn't, and prices for merchandise ranged from $60 to $400. But just the ticket sales were contributed towards the Hoover case or whatever the case is. That being said, my question is, if I'm going to put on a show, there's going to be cost. I don't read too much into things like that because it discounts the cost of business and the cost of even putting something on together like this. Somebody needs to get paid. And where's that cash going to come from? Forget if these men are filthy rich and sitting at the top. It's still a business at the end of the day. And somebody has to get paid and the invoice is going to come. Somebody has to swipe that. But off of that, I think that alone is enough commitment. It shouldn't. Were there ways that they could have improved how they focus on the Larry Hoover thing? Definitely, but you also don't want to use the common man. And who's they in LA? Who's Drake's biggest fan group? It was a bunch of women. You don't want to stand preaching Larry Hoover stuff in front of a bunch of women at a Drake show.
But that's kind of my point. Is like it seems like and I read that Larry Hoover had expressed his concerns about the publicity not being carried out in such a way that would be detrimental to his case. And like, no disrespect to the event or to the to Drake or Kanye. I would just the thing that kind of soured me on it, it made me not want to check it out as much, right? Was like, yeah, I see so the money goes to Larry Hoover. Is the community that we spoke about, that right, that he impacted is very much the South Side community, right? And the proceeds from the ticket sales are going to two organizations, one in Evanston, which is up north where Northwestern University is, and another
hold on, Miles, hold on. Are you giving us top secret behind the scenes information?
No,
I think we're getting a full scoop.
You will always get a full scoop on the All the Way Live podcast, but this isn't top secret information. This is information that I Googled that I didn't get from none of the promotional materials from the concert that was in this man's name, right? But I found out that the proceeds were going to these two organizations and on the north side, right? Far north side, which. Not to say that there aren't issues of violence and that re-entry projects for returning citizens on the north side don't deserve to get funded, but it told me that maybe some thought went into making this a benefit, but not a lot of thought was thought all the way through. Like, let's impact the communities that the man that we're putting at the forefront of this, whether or not we have his full consent, like, is from. Or if it was just like, it's always just boils down to who you know, right? And somebody knew Kanye's camp and Drake's camp and made the connection, and that's why they got the look, right? But when you look at that, when you look at the merch, the amount they're charging for the merch, Like, that's the first thing I said to you, bro. When you told me about this concert, I said, Drake X Kanye with Free Larry Hoover on it is a $1,000 hoodie, 1,000%, right? And they're charging up to $360 for their merchandise. And the final thing is, when you think about who Drake is, when you think about who Kanye is, these aren't the most street dudes. These aren't the dudes that you think of as most affiliated with the GDs or with gangs. These are the dudes that tend to lean into that street credibility. These are two dudes that were beefing until they were brought together by Jay Prince. Right. And the whole thing, just from my perspective, looks a little money grabby a little bit to me.
You
right.
think it's a money grab? You think it's not a genuine show? You think it's a disguised money grab?
I think some things are two things. But I think when you're talking about somebody who's incarcerated for their lifetime multiple times over, I think about when you're talking about a very complicated legacy that entangles hip hop and violence, and also community groups and organizing, and a community that still very much needs help. You're championing this person's name, but the show is in LA. When you did your show in Chicago and rebuilt your house from the South Side, I am also aware that it wasn't really Southside folks that was put into that. I'm just saying that I'm not to big this up as a something that I feel really furthered the cause of Larry Hoover, tapped more people into prison and justice reform. I feel like that's kind of surface, right? And I just don't feel like calling it all that. It's cool that Drake and Kanye pieced it up. Right. But that's the extent to which that this really addresses any issues to me.
What would be what in your eyes would work as an actual something that could actually value? Because and I mean to say, I try not to expect perfection out of good intentions sometimes, especially at this magnitude, at this scale. You're standing at a place where you have to create an idea, and then it has to be executed. And in the process of that execution, sometimes you're far removed from who gets to pick who the contractors are to work on the rebuilding of the house in Southside Chicago. Because all I'm saying is, or all you'd be saying, if you're from Kanye's perspective, is give that call like, yo, make that happen. I don't care how you make that happen. Make that happen.
And that happens way too much to communities of color and disenfranchised, disinvested communities. Somebody with a lot more power that's only kind of thinking about them says, make that happen. I don't care how you make it happen. And that's what we have to stop allowing to happen, right? And articulating why. And without the consent of those communities, without asking, that's missed opportunities. When you don't involve the community, you missing opportunities every time to make it impactful, to maximize this, to make it more than just a Amazon Prime one-time concert show that sold a lot of merch. You know what I'm saying? Like that's exactly the point, is that it doesn't take too much to make this something that it could be powerful and worth the complex issues behind it and worth using this person's name, right? Make sure that those facts that I just was giving you are front and center, right? Like, make sure that everybody who attends the show, thought about buying tickets, thought about buying merch, leaves there with the understanding that this person's life is forefront, and like the fact that this person is on trial, that we're contesting is that this person has been locked up for over 50 years after being locked up at a time when Black leaders were being specifically targeted by operations like COINTELPRO, it deserves another look. That's what should be at the forefront. And I don't feel like that it was, right?
Yeah. And, we give big ups to the family that we be speaking to. We give big ups to the crowd that's listening with us at all times. Got some people in the building. I want us to have drops. That would be so dope. Do we still have drops on the show? Or do we become too professional?
We can reintegrate the drops. Maybe not this episode right this second right now. You dig me? But we gonna bring it to you. Bringing back the drops. That's our Christmas gift to y'all, for sure. But you dig me, man?
Yeah, I do. and off the back of that, right? We're discussing the Larry Hoover. We're discussing the Larry Hoover benefit concert. Larry Hoover being you said GD, correct?
Yeah, Larry Hoover was one of the influential gang leaders of the Black Gangster Disciples, starting in the 1970s, and was incarcerated due to his involvement with due to the violence that was associated with the organization, and now people are calling to re-examine his incarceration. Due to the circumstances both surrounding his arrest and his potential as a community leader and organizer.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. But it speaks, Miles, to what you said about when you do these types of benefit concerts and community including activities, there does have to be a additional level of care that you pay that you give towards how it's executed, more so than you would in a basic corporate setting, right? And even the best intention with the biggest budget can face some very significant oversights if not handled with the care that it needs to. It's in the same way that when Jay-Z was on the NFL, when Jay-Z partnered with the NFL, and we looked at that and we're like, really, this is what this Jay-Z NFL concert is. And it was quite underwhelming and unimpressive because of how it didn't fully reach the type of consideration you need to be able to execute these types of things in the communities that they're in.
Yeah, and you for sure, and it's you can very easily, very quickly do harm as a big community, as a big corporation with a lot of publicity that's pushing a narrative in a certain space. If you're not thinking about how you're wielding your influence, right? And it's the same thing, man. Like again, it doesn't take much, but you gotta involve the community. How you avoid missing that, how you avoid missing the mark, how you avoid putting yourself in a place where public scrutiny shows your event in a poor light. Involve the community, and don't try and I think part of the issue too is they're trying to keep up with this TikTok timeline, bro. Kanye drops an album, Drake drops an album, Kanye does a Drink Champs interview, Kanye and Drake are beefing, Kanye and Kim are getting divorced. You know what I'm saying? Like, we gotta do the Kanye, Free Larry Hoover, Drake getting back together shit right now. We don't have time to talk to the community. We don't have time to figure out how to make this the best thing that it could be, the most impactful thing, to really consider the issues behind it. We gotta catch this while it's hot, and I think that is to its detriment as well.
To be fair, if I was somebody in jail waiting on my homies to put on a show, I would hope they put on that show expeditiously. I'll be like, bro, I promise we'll get back to the community. Hurry up. Put this thing together one time. Let's go.
Okay, devil's advocate. If you already been in jail for near 50 years and you have one shot to really get people's attention, how well thought out do you want that to be? And who do you want to be at the helm of it? And you know what I'm saying? Like, you got all eyes on you one time in terms of your being in jail. And he even said, and if you're the organizer and the guy that you're putting, whose name at the forefront of it says, I'm feeling very uneasy about the way that this publicity is being approached, what is your responsibility to do then?
If he says it, if I'm Larry Hoover and I say that I'm uncomfortable with it, yeah, you're definitely right. Let's everybody take a second, pace yourself in how you make these decisions, you know?
Hey, bro.
Hey, brother. I feel like we done give these people some hot content. Let's carry on